Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Welcome in. Hello, hello. We'll
Hi.
give folks a moment to just, get their audio all set up okay, get situated. So, hello, we're glad you're here. I know we are a moment or so past the hour, so I feel like maybe we could get started. But welcome. We're really glad that you've joined us for this faculty office hour session for French language and culture. My name is Grant Sewell, Associate Dean of Admission, and really glad to be here with you today. And really glad to have two of our esteemed faculty members with us. And we have Catherine and Anne, and they're really excited to share more with you about the work that they do, the work that they do with students. As we kind of get going, I would encourage you, if you have questions, to use the chat feature, which I would imagine most people are pretty familiar with the Zoom chat feature these days, but that can be a great way that we can keep an eye on that and we can kind of speak to things that you're curious to know. And so feel free to kind of put those questions in there and we'll work to kind of speak to as many as we can. Without further ado, maybe I'll turn it over to our two faculty guests for an introduction, whoever might like to kick us off.
I'll start and then I'll pass it to you, Catherine. My name is Anne Delehanty. I teach in French as well as in Humanities 110. So I also teach the introductory humanities class. And my specialty is 17th century French and Spanish literature. I have a PhD in comparative literature, and I've been at Reed since 2000. Catherine?
Hi, everybody. My name is Catherine. Delighted that you're both here. Feel free to ask questions to us, by the way, directly as well. You can talk to us directly. But I'm Catherine. I was born in France and raised in France. I studied in the UK and in the US for my PhD. I specialize, well, I teach in the French department, not in Hume. But in the French department, I teach both literature and film, as well as languages. And my research focuses both on 19th century poetry as well as 70s cinema and documentary film. I also think we should refer to our two other colleagues in the department who aren't here with us today. So there are four of us in the French department. There is Luc Monin, who is from Switzerland, who also teaches language and literature, and he specializes in 18th century French literature, so the philosophers of the Enlightenment. And our colleague Hugh Hochman is a specialist of 20th century literature, focusing on poetry. And we all teach language as well as literature.
So with that, I think what we'll do is we'll move to a very short presentation that I wanted to just show you a little bit about the French program at Reed, and then just a little guidance for when you're thinking about one thing that I know has been helpful in my own life with helping people think about where to go to college and what to do is kind of looking at what it would look like, kind of what would it look like in the 4 years. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen for just a little bit. And so what you see here is the French department website, which is, if you just go to the Reed website and it's under academics, you can go to French, or you can just look for the French program. And so everything that I'm talking about is for the most part here, but I did just want to show it to you quickly. And you'll see under degree requirements, if you would want to be a French major, that's an option. But I want to emphasize that in our department, we really are open to multiple majors that interface with our major, in fact. So there's comparative literature, there's French, there's film and media studies is working up a major. When is that going to be in place, Catherine? Is that soon?
Hopefully next year, but it has to be reviewed by CAPP.
Yeah, so it'll be soon-ish. There's also critical race and ethnic studies. There's a number of majors that we are more than happy to serve and to work with people. And so whether one is a French major or any of the variety of majors that we work with is relatively unimportant to us. And we welcome all kinds of students across majors. Also, we are really happy to work with people who are science majors. I was just teaching a class where they say half the class were science majors, but they just love taking French and studying French. So what I wanted to show you here is just all the requirements for our majors are here. For our major is here, and that's a lot of details. But the main thing is that it's 6 units in literature at the upper division level, ability to write at the level of French 320, which is our advanced composition class, and then the thesis 470 is the thesis. But what I'll show you major planners in just a second, but I wanted to show you can kind of envision your time at Reed through this very nice program or system we have of having major planners. But other things that are possible before I get to the major planners is minoring in French is very popular right now. At Reed, it's pretty hard to do a double major, and it's something that a lot of people want to do, but then realistically, as they get through their time at Reed, they realize writing 2 theses could be kind of hard. And French would normally at another institution be a very popular double major because it's a great skill to have, and it's also something that a lot of people enjoy studying. So to kind of make up for that at Reed, what we've done is we've introduced a minor, and the minor, I think the requirements for it are quite reasonable. So it's something that a lot of students are able to do and are enjoying doing along with whatever their major is. And so the minor, the requirements for the minor are here. If you start out with no French at all, it's the most number of courses. A unit is a course at Reed. So it'd be 7 starting from French 1. But if you start with any French at all, you could start at the 2nd year level or at the 3rd year level. And at the 3rd year level, the requirements are only 4. So I just wanted to point that out, that that's just another kind of exciting part of our curriculum that students are really taking advantage of. And so there's a nice community of people who are minoring in French right now. And I think it's a nice thing to think about when you're thinking about what you might want to do. So to my mind, one of the big questions, and you can see when I change tabs, right? Yes, you see major planners now? Good.
Yeah.
We're not teaching on Zoom.
Just want to interrupt you for a second and say something about the minor. And at the moment, I just looked and we have 16 minors and a ton of people majoring in psychology, in biology, biochem, physics, math. I mean, it's pretty incredible how French and STEM are linked. I mean, we have a lot of English and history majors as well, but those are the people you're going to see in class. So just a little aside.
That's a great point. And that's enough people to create a cohort or a community. And so what I just put in the chat is to get to this website that I personally think is one of the most important websites when you're making a decision about going to a college, which is looking at the kind of major planners. And that's where you can sort of envision, what would my life look like if I were at Reed? And I just wanted to show you that there are, for instance, the comparative literature major planner tells you what classes you might want to take if you, or you would need to take if you were going to be a comparative literature major, French, but also some of these other more interesting kind of combined majors like history, literature, or literature theater, I guess it goes the other direction. And so that's where you can kind of go through and map what would be the classes that I have to take. And it's all laid out really, really clearly. So for French, you see these are the 6 classes you'd have to take. And that can help you then, in conjunction with the catalog, that can help you kind of think about, is that what I want my major to look like? One of the virtues of French, to my mind, is that the requirements are not super, super heavy. And so, I mean, there's heavy requirement in the form of needing to take French language and being able to speak the language pretty well. But other than that, I think it's got a really reasonable set of requirements, meaning that you could do something else along with it. And so by looking at these different major planners, you can kind of say, well, what would it look like if I were at Reed? What would my 4 years potentially look like? And I think that's a really good exercise to do when you're thinking about where you might want to go to school. So now I'm going to pass it over to Catherine, who is going to talk to us about study abroad also, which is a big thing that people are often interested in, as well as the language houses at Reed.
Yeah, so I'll start with the language houses. We have a number of language houses on campus, one in Chinese, Russian, other languages. In French, we have 2 language houses. They house a total of 13 students, and in each house, you have an HA, a house advisor, who's a Reed student, usually a junior or senior, with a lot of experience in French. And then we have a French scholar. So we have a total of 2. One of the French scholars is a student who recently graduated from an undergraduate institution. They're usually doing an MA in France. One is coming from Paris, and the other is coming from Rennes in the west of France. They're super enthusiastic about being on campus. They teach conversation classes for second-year students. They organize a ton of events, and everything is going to be happening in the French houses. So the French house is not only like a dorm, a living community, it's a very cozy place with its own kitchen, a fireplace, sofas, TVs, everything you want to just kind of chill out in the French house. Depending on who's in the house, people will be speaking French all the time or part of the time, or Franglish seems to be a very popular language in the French house. Anyway, it's a really cozy community. There's a lot of competition to apply and get into the French house, but generally we make it work because we have 13 rooms. So we've been pretty successful at placing students in the French house. So that gives you, even though, again, Portland, Oregon is not in a Francophone space by any stretch of the imagination, the French houses on campus are really great communities where you can sort of practice casual French outside of class. And you are surrounded by at least two native French speakers. So that's what's available on campus in terms of like, cultural activities complementing our course offerings in the French department. They also have parties and events with other language organized by in collaboration, with other language scholars. So movie festivals or, cooking events, those are really popular. And then obviously, if you're really interested in perfecting your French, we really encourage students to go spend at least a semester abroad. And the French department has one of the highest enrollments of students going to study abroad. And we have 3 main destinations in France. One is based
I put the link to the study abroad stuff in the chat in case anybody wants to actually look at the program. So sorry to interrupt you, but just to let you know that's there. Go ahead.
Oh, this is great. And it's great. And also there is a whole office called IPO, which is International Programs Office. And it's run by our colleague, Alberto Rio del Malo, who also you should feel free to reach out to. Maybe we could put his email in the chat box, but he's overseeing all of the study abroad programs. So whether you're going to Taiwan or to Paris or Argentina, he's the person you'll be working with in terms of like figuring out logistics, getting your visa, making sure that you have a host family, all of those things. We have a really good team of people who are able to facilitate study abroad. So I think that's why we're so successful. At the moment, I think we've got 9 students studying in France. So that's a pretty high average. And our students, again, like they include people in history, anthropology, psychology, French. Obviously, a lot of our French majors will spend up to a whole year abroad in France. So our 3 exchange locations are Paris, Lille in the north of France, and Rennes in the west of France. Rennes is the capital of Brittany. So our oldest programs are in Paris. This program is called CUPA. It's the Center for University Programs Abroad. So a number of liberal arts colleges in the US and all the Ivy Leagues go through CUPA to send their parents, to send their students. You can send your parents abroad. You send your, so these colleges send their students to study in Parisian universities all over the city of Paris, but you are hosted by and coached by a team of Franco-American people based at this small center called CUPA. So CUPA is going to help set you up with a host family. CUPA is going to make sure that all your needs are met. They're going to help you sign up for courses in universities across Paris, but universities as well as music conservatories, theater conservatories, art schools, dance schools, you name it. You basically have more access to elite private education in Paris than French students do. It's a little strange, but that is the reality. So that's a really popular program. I think most of our students go to CUPA. And if you're at Reed next year, we're more than happy to set you up with students who've come back from Coupa because they're the most passionate advocates of that experience. Our other very popular program, but we send less students there just because people are maybe less comfortable with a totally immersive program, which is our program in Rennes, where you're basically a student at the University of Rennes. So there is no kind of hand-holding there. Obviously, there's a team of administrators and teachers who can help you navigate the university, but this is a very popular program for French majors, people who want to be like a French student and take all of their classes in French and live in the city of Rennes. So with this program, you have the option of living in university accommodations in a university residency, or just in downtown Rennes, which is a beautiful medieval city. Yeah, I think people prefer living downtown. The university will help you find an apartment, but you're much more independent when you go there. And then our third program is in the north of France. It's called Lille. You're associated with both the University of Lille, so you have access to all classes, history, literature, everything, all topics usually offered in a liberal arts college. But you're also, you have access to Sciences Po, which is a very famous political science institute in France. There's one branch of it in Paris, and there's one branch in Lille. And Reed students have access to both schools, either through Coupa or through our exchange program in Lille. So essentially, I mean, it's an amazing situation where you're living abroad, discovering another culture, perfecting your French, but you also have access to the best professors in France. And obviously for political science, being in Lille, which is right next to Brussels, you're also in contact with a lot of professors who are teaching political science across Europe, since Brussels is the center for the EU. So that's another reason why Lille is pretty popular. We have another program that is in the process of being vetted, but it should be available very soon. And this is a multi-site program. So it's a program that lasts one semester, but you are in 3 different locations. You begin in Paris, you spend a month there taking language, literature, political sciences, history courses. You get to select your classes. And then you spend a month in Rabat in Morocco, and same thing, same setup. You're going to take French language classes, but there you also have the chance to immerse yourself in Moroccan culture, as well as you can take Arabic classes there, even though Arabic is not the language spoken around you in Rabat, but those classes are available. And then the 3rd month you spend in Dakar, the capital of Senegal. So you're kind of moving southwest in your trajectory. And yeah, you're getting to appreciate 3 different cultures. French is going to be a through line. There's obviously a colonial past that explains why French is still a popular language in those regions, but that's the trajectory you'll be following. But you're also taking classes that allow you to immerse yourself and appreciate the local culture, local art, literature, etc. So and Dakar is one of the main music cities in West Africa, as well as it's a film mecca, I would say, in Africa on the scale of the continent. So that's also a really appealing feature of Senegal and Dakar specifically. So those are our programs abroad and an overview of what we have to offer culturally on campus. And I would love it if you had questions for us about any of what we've been talking about.
I was going to say there was one question that was shared in the chat to me, and that was just I think as a follow-up to you sharing a little bit about the French house, which was really great, and usually being able to find a space for all students who are interested. But there was just a question about how a student could maybe put themselves in a competitive position if it was certain classes or things they do to kind of be a compelling person for that house.
Already thinking in the right way. Do you want to answer that one, Catherine?
Yeah, definitely. So like we get a lot of applicants, but the French department has a lot of say about who gets into the French houses. So if we know you, if we've had you in class, whoever was your professor is going to advocate for you. So we just sit around with a huge list and we go say, oh yeah, Daphne, great, you know, like Michael, yeah, we need to get them into this dorm space. So yeah, it's
But
really like taking classes in French is a big advantage, but also like
that's not, it's not
participating.
required. It's not
No, it's
required.
not
I mean, I
required.
think
No, absolutely.
what is required though is that you have attended some events. So what's ideal is in your first year that you spend time at the French house, because one of the best ways of knowing if you want to live in the French house is going to the French house and spending time and helping them to organize activities and stuff too. So I'd say the combination of those two would be wonderful. Try to get to know some of the faculty, but also go to events. And this year, hopefully, I hope they'll continue, because this year they've done a really wonderful coffee hour every Friday. And
Yeah,
I
that's
believe those have
been
been really well
ongoing for
attended. Sorry, go ahead.
that's been ongoing for a couple of years, the Friday at 4. So it's called La Pause Café, coffee break. The different houses have different regular events, like the Russian house has movie nights. The French house has found that food and coffee and drinks on Friday afternoons tends to draw a lot of people. So like I went to the French house a couple of weeks ago just to, they said, you know, you should come out. We're going to do karaoke. And I told them I wouldn't sing, but I would go and listen to them. And they ended up not doing karaoke, but there were about 15 people there in the living room just hanging out. And it was really nice. And yeah, everybody, I mean, I knew people there who only had like a semester of French behind them, and they were making their way through the conversation and they were having fun. They often make, so one of our scholars is always from Brittany, and crepes come from Brittany. And so they usually have this special expertise in making crepes. And so that's something that, you know, whatever, they'll decide on the spur of the moment what they want to do. But often they'll just whip up some batter and make a few crepes together. And so it's very laid back, very nice. They also have dinner events, but faculty don't really hear about those because we're not invited to to their
But we
dinner
hear,
event.
yeah, that's totally right. But that we hear that they're very well appreciated. And so the nice
Yeah,
thing is that I think it's a good community, and that feels like it's alive and lively. And so whichever of you ask the question, I think you're right. How, you know, it's a desirable place to live. You know, these are nice houses, and it's an opportunity to live in a fairly small community with considerable autonomy as well. So to my mind, if I were at Reed, I would want to live in the French house, or one of the language houses at least.
and the language houses are kind of clustered together on one side of the campus. So it's along Woodstock Avenue or Boulevard, I guess it is. So you're like next to the Spanish house, and I think the house right in front of you is Chinese house, and then the German house is nearby. But there's like a big plaza, so whenever the sun comes out, like people are from the houses, the language houses are just hanging out together, like having picnics and doing their homework or projects together. They're just hanging out there. So it's a really nice space. But, you know, if you want to go shopping, like the supermarkets are just up the street, you know, you walk 15 minutes and you're there. So you're really in the middle of the Woodstock neighborhood. So that's another really, I mean, I feel like one should really advertise this, but Reed is in a city. It's a very vibrant city. There are tons of like coffee shops, amazing food stores, restaurants, food carts. And, you know, Reed campus is right next to all of this. So, you know, you both have a very vibrant life on campus, but you have access to like an amazing neighborhood and community projects right on the other street, you know, right across the street from Reed College. And so the language houses are in a really desirable location as well.
We're happy to answer questions about any aspect. Oh, here's one. I'm taking the AP. I don't know if the chat gets kept in the video, so I'll just read it out. I'm taking AP French. Does this count towards my placement in French classes, or is it just the placement exam? That is an excellent question. It will give you potentially credit depending on what score you get, obviously. It doesn't count towards the French placement exam, but we are finding that people who have taken AP French tend to do very well on the French placement exam. So the French placement exam is not a huge onerous burden. It's, what is it, about an hour at most, and especially the people who've made it through. Yeah, the
Yeah.
people who've made it through AP, it's one of these smart tests where it, like, if it realizes that you're pretty good at it, it'll just keep going higher and higher. So if you're really quite good at French, you finish it in 15 minutes and it just says, oh, that this is someone who should be at level 300 or higher. We do find that it's pretty predictive in a way that that is helpful for us. And so what we would recommend, you said you're taking it this year. So obviously you'll be in truly excellent French shape in May. And so then, you know, take the placement exam as early as you can. So I think it's opening, what did we say, in July?
July 10th.
July
July
10th.
10th is when the placement test open.
Yeah,
And regardless of what you want to do, just take it right off the bat, you know, because
right.
some people have done a lot of French in high school and then they wait a year and they feel like they don't place at the right level because they've waited all that time. So yeah, our recommendation is like, just take it right away. And then you can decide when you want to take your French.
And we really are not ogres in the least. We are not, Reed is not the kind of place where we are ruled by tests. I mean, I suppose in some small ways we would be, but for the most part, if you get a score on a placement test and you say that does not reflect my belief about it, we have it happen both ways. Like there are students who are like, oh, that's way too high. I'm too scared to take that level. Or students who say that's way too low. I want to take a higher level. We are more than happy. We're available. We can talk to you about your placement and we can figure out what would be the right placement. And we really like to, in the case of the student who says that's way too high, we say, well, why don't you challenge yourself and try it for a little bit? But our classes like French 1 and 2 are offered at the same time, so that if French 2, let's say, is 210 is too hard, you can easily just switch into French 1 then. So we try to make it so that it's easy for someone to move between the classes as necessary. But certainly with AP, most of the students who've taken AP French will place out of second year French and will place into, not everybody. I mean, again, it's going to depend because, as you know, the pandemic has kind of messed up a lot of the placement stuff. And so it's not quite probably as predictable as it once was. But like I said, we're really happy to work with you. And as Catherine said, taking the exam when it's fresh in your mind is good, because that's going to be more reflective of your French level.
And I think this question maybe kind of ties into what you both were just talking about placement and, you know, kind of making sure students kind of find the challenge or the class that really kind of suits them well. But, you know, what might be different with studying French at Reed versus maybe another college or university? I know you kind of touched on the city and some of the opportunities with the houses, but didn't know if there's anything else you might want to add.
I think the smaller class size is pretty huge. That you know, in the class I was just teaching, it was 10 students. We were talking about existentialism and Sartre. It was like the very most prototypical college conversation about why do we exist and what do we think about Sartre's model of existence. And just the rapport in a class that size, that small, it's just outstanding. Everybody felt really comfortable talking about what they thought our reason for existing is. And I think that is different than what you're going to get at a lot of other institutions. It might be similar to other small liberal arts colleges, but certainly it's very different from the university model. So the university model is excellent, and I appreciate the university model. I'm not maligning it in any way, but it's just going to be a different thing that you're going to get. That at Reed we have conference-based or seminar-style conversations. It's very conversation-based. It's very much creating a community in the class. And a community that exists inside and outside the classroom. And so it, you know, if it's a small enough place, you know, people, you trust them, and you can have really good conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would completely agree with what Anne has just said. And, you know, another feature of Reed classes is that they are student-led, right? I mean, the professor is there. We create the syllabus. We work with students behind the scenes, but in class, it really is a conversation that is taking place among the students, and whatever is compelling them in the text or in the film or in whatever we happen to be studying is going to be at the center of the conversation. It's like the professor obviously has many ideas about the text and its interest, but we all acknowledge that texts are alive, films are alive, and their meanings also change over time with new readers, with new viewers, with new interpreters, and we're excited by that. I mean, that's why we love what we do as professors. Is like every single class to a certain degree, reinvents the text that you thought you knew. And that's really powerful as an experience. And same today, we were doing a class on Rousseau's theories of education, and he has these really sort of ideas that are both very modern and also completely crazy. And the class, started out with a student. She prepared the text, she had identified which sections she wanted to discuss, and she orchestrated the conversation. Like every once in a while, they would turn to me and say, comment on dit ça, or how do you say this and in French, or how would you translate this? And like, I'll say things, I'll add things to the board, I'll be happy to clarify something in the text, but essentially the students are talking all the time and they love it, and same thing. It's a small class. There are 8 students and 1 auditor, so they're just talking all the time. And I haven't been in many other liberal arts colleges, but I have had colleagues, maybe I shouldn't name which college they were coming from, but sitting in our classes, one person came to a film class. She's a film specialist. And she was like, I've never heard such a high level conversation led entirely by students. And yeah, for me, it was just like, it was great, but it was also just like normal. And I guess I just didn't realize how lucky we are as a community of people. People are also like, students really respect each other's differences. I think everybody has in common that they love to learn, that they're excited about learning. It's like nobody's just dragging their feet like, oh, I have to take classes. So in that sense, there's this sort of nerdy passion, but people are just so respectful of one another. And I'd say it's particularly so in language classes, because everybody realized there's a certain level of vulnerability, right? You're not speaking in your native language, and there's a huge respect for one another that prevails. So that's specific, I think, to read.
Another thing I was just kind of thinking about, hearing you both, talk about, the student-led, kind of aspect of the classroom oftentimes, and the work that students get to do, it does kind of lead to the culminating work, the senior thesis. And I was just kind of wondering if you might be able to share an example or two about some senior thesis works you've supported or you've seen kind of in the French space.
Do you want to start, Catherine, or should I?
Sure. Yeah. So like last year I was working, so this year I should begin with, I'm working with a student who is interested in Caribbean writers who are both writing in French and in English. So it's a comparative literature thesis, but because there's such a strong French emphasis and she's working on poetry and that's my field, I'm working closely with the student. It's been a really amazing experience. I feel like I've learned so much about Caribbean poets from places I was just not familiar with their work at all. And it is entirely student-led in terms of like the direction in which the work is going. The student here is doing a lot of kind of original research, so is accessing certain archives, has had to be in dialogue with authors that she actually met a couple of them during the winter break. It's just been an experience of surprise. The thesis that I worked on with the student last year was it was a film thesis, and that student was writing one chapter on a very famous surrealist French film from the 1920s, late 1920s, called The Starfish, and was interested in surveilling the evolution of experimental short video art until the 70s. And so the second chapter was focusing on a Korean American video artist called Teresa Ha-Kyun-cha, who's also a writer and a poet. So the student ended up working both on film and poetry in the context of that thesis.
And I'll just add that I think the thesis is a great opportunity for exploring all kinds of things. And in Comp Lit, for instance, we've had all kinds of really fun combinations, including computer science and literature, or film and literature, gender studies and literature. One person wanted to do cyborgs and literature. And so I think we've just had a really wide variety of thesis topics. And what's so great about the thesis is it's a moment to work one-on-one with a faculty member for a year on something that really is your own project. And so it's in the humanities, at least, it's going to be very much directed by the student and where the student's interests lie. In the sciences, it's a little bit different. There's a variety. Some of the science theses are going to be part of a science faculty member's lab, and then some are going to be individual student-driven research. So that'll just depend on that. But in French, it's always what the student wants to work on. So one thing that a lot of you, I think, come in and have this sort of passion project, and those passion projects sometimes, they unfurl and they really do become something really exciting by senior year. And we're all excited to work on this stuff. We don't have to be experts necessarily in the field. As Catherine was saying, it can be something like, a literary group of texts that we don't know particularly well, but we all really like exploring them. And so it's kind of this idea of exploring together. And honestly, I'll never forget working on a thesis on Borges and computer programming languages. That was really, really interesting. And it turned out well. And I think that, that these kinds of things lead in really interesting directions.
Mm-hmm. And concretely, I mean, the thesis project is not something, you're not alone doing it, you're leading it, but you are meeting once a week with your advisor. And, sometimes it's more than that when, there are deadlines to meet and you want more feedback. But essentially the rhythm is like the first few sessions you would meet to just discuss your general interest, kind of identify a potential text, film, object of study. And then you start writing a few pages. We give you reading recommendations. We show you how to do research. We show you how to develop a bibliography, how to use databases in the library. I mean, it's a learning process. You're going to start learning doing that in your classes. But essentially, the one-on-one thesis experience is also like just helping you become independent researchers. So it's not just writing a thesis by yourself in your corner, but it's a class, right? It's a class about how to become a researcher in your major, in the area that your major covers.
Hey, I was going to ask, hearing you describe, that kind of like strong connection, with a student and their advisor, their professor, and that kind of guidepost, and kind of thinking about how Reed does kind of emphasize, feedback and kind of that narrative kind of sharing of information. How do you see students adjusting to kind of Reed's grading style, like within your department? Like maybe new students to the program.
I would say that I see a lot of that, and I know Catherine does too in the language classes. I see a lot of that in Hum 110. So in Hum 110, it's a big adjustment to what? I don't get an actual grade written on my paper. But in Hum 110, what I would say is one of my favorite parts of being at Reed is that there are 7 papers for the freshman year in Hum 110. And after each paper, you meet with your conference leader, your faculty member, for half an hour to debrief the paper. And I know my kids have occasionally met with their high school teachers to talk about a paper, but never for half an hour. And the idea is it's a kind of discussion of the ideas, thinking what went right, what went wrong, how do I want to tweak my methods. But it's a little bit of a kind of preliminary version of what the thesis relationship will become later, where you're kind of over the year, you're talking about your writing with someone. So that's the most important place, to answer your question, that's the most important place where that adjustment to the grade situation is. It's where, we all agree that it's going to be better to have a longer version of assessment, not just A, B, C, D, F, but rather what went well, what didn't go well. And so it's kind of figuring out where one's place is that happens in those kind of conversations. So it's a much more conversation-based model of assessment. But I think if we think about it, grades are easy because they're really quick to get, I got a B or whatever. But this is harder, but it's more fruitful. And I think you establish a relationship then over the course of the year, and you really do feel quite intentional about what you're doing, and you understand better how things are, what's improving and what might need further improvement.
Yeah, and I think we have, at least in French, a kind of similar relationship to grading, even in the context of exams. I mean, I always tell students, like, just treat this as self-evaluation, like prepare for the exam, here are review sheets, remember to go over these aspects that we covered in class. So we're giving them a lot of ways in which they can prepare for a language quiz, for example. But then, like once you get your paper back, you have annotations and you have a chance to self-correct and get more points. And if something you really just didn't understand, well, then that's when you come into my office or into Anne's office and we work through it together until you understand. And like just this morning, I saw a student who's in the advanced language course and really good student, but, really confused about this one form. And we just went through it very simply, took 20 minutes. And he's like, I feel so much better. We're just like laughing about it because it was like, yeah, there's no, there's no stress associated with, I mean, I know Reed is considered this like high pressured, very academic place. And it is because people are passionate, but you don't need to be the best all the time. And if you make mistakes, like that's the chance that you have to get together with your professor and to work through them until it's clear, right? We want everybody to feel empowered and to understand the material, like not to regurgitate it or memorize stuff, but really understand, why is that sentence structure such, or like, why do you do agreements here? And we've all been teaching for so long, we know the kinds of mistakes or conceptual constructions that are just like a little harder to grasp, and we know how to guide a student through understanding how that works. And so it really is about really just self-improvement, right? Just find your own best potential. And I feel like that's also the feedback that you get on all of your papers, the fact that it's not just a grade that would take us like 1 minute to write on a paper, but we take a half hour to like write a commentary that allows you to be an even better writer. Like, we care about your development and we're going to accompany you throughout these 4 years. So that I feel like is the mentality. So it's not at all like in some high schools where people are comparing grades or really stressing each other out, or people feeling excluded because they don't feel like they're performing in the way that would be expected of them. We're always there to help everybody at every single level. And there's just I've never experienced this atmosphere of competition over grades in any of my classes since 2005. I've been at Reed since 2005. And I've just never heard of that kind of situation. And then as academic advisors, so all of us are teachers, we're advising theses as well, but we're also academic advisors, so essentially counselors. So when you arrive at Reed, you have a faculty who sort of takes care of you, who is there to answer your questions, there to orient you through your course selection, answer questions about whether it's your dorm room or access to, I don't know what, like a volunteer opportunity. We're going to be the person who helps you figure out where to find the answers to all of your questions. But we're also kind of like, we have access, all of your advisors will have access to your grades. And so if somebody, for instance, is in the pre-med program and really is feeling very self-conscious about their grades, they can get in touch with their advisor and just explain that situation to them. So one of my academic advisees this year is a psychology major. So she's not a French major and she wants to go to med school. And so, she's been very transparent about the fact that, she didn't look at her grades in the first semester, but second semester, she's like, oh, I kind of like to know what they are. And so she came to my office and we looked at them together and we talked about it. And she thought that was really helpful. So you'll never have a grade thrown at you. You'll never have that violent relationship to grades. Also, like, I think, oh, it's so good to have you, Tia. And happy to answer your questions. So feel free to email us as well if you have more questions. So I don't know, Anne, if there's anything else to
No,
to
I think you
add?
covered it all. I think you did great. That was excellent.
I think we have time for one more question. And so the last question that I was kind of thinking about is, what is it that you love about Reed? What keeps you here?
I think that one's pretty easy. It's the students for most of
Yeah.
us. I don't know if Catherine would agree, but maybe yours is a different one, but it's the students for me that it's, you just come into class and you just have these really interesting conversations, and that's a self-propelling and exciting way to go about your day. So I feel like we've got a really great community here.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's the students. I mean, I think the faculty as a community, like in the French department, we have a really good relationship. We enjoy joking together, like planning things. But yeah, I mean, we spend a lot of time around students, and that's what gives us energy, right? I mean, we're all also researchers, so like, especially in the summer or every 6 years, right? They were on a sabbatical cycle. We're very invested in our research and writing books, writing, articles, doing original research. And that also fuels our passion in the class. But, as I was saying, the classes are student led. So that's where the vibrancy really resides. And we also have amazing people working in staff, right?
Of
I mean,
course, and the
Grant
staff
is
too.
here, and in all of the departments of the university, I mean, of the college, right? People are really grateful for what they bring to one another. I work really closely, for instance, with the video librarian, the person who's in charge of the audiovisual collection. And none of what I do in film classes would be possible without this like amazing collaboration with this fantastic person who is like, yeah, working in the library, and I'm in contact with him every day, and yeah, and with some other people in the administration every day. We also run committees. Anne is on the committee for advancement and tenure, and so in that context, right, we have a lot of FaceTime with our colleagues. I run the fellowships and awards committee, so I also talk with a lot of students whom I don't have in class, but we're strategizing about how to put together the best possible dossier for Fulbright or for a Rhodes Scholarship or a Watson or Mitchell, Marshall. There are lots of them. If you're interested in fellowships, I'm happy to talk to you about them. But yeah, so I feel like all levels of the university, because of the college, because it's such a small space, work really well with one another. I think the one exception is sometimes we argue in faculty meetings. That's the grumpy side that the students never see. That's a very peculiar space.
The healthy discourse, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think we've kind of used the time that we had. And so I wanted to offer a tremendous thank you to both Catherine and Anne for taking some time out of their day to speak with us today. And thanks to you all for joining and asking some of the questions that were on your mind. We hope that this time was helpful. There'll also be other ways to continue to get to know more about some of the different programs and faculty at Reed. I know tomorrow we have a conversation with the German department, over the weekend, political science and religion. Next week, art and media studies. So just to say, there'll be more opportunities to continue to connect with us, but we want to say thank you all so much for taking some time with us, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.